What's going on, guys? My name is Richard Moglen and welcome back to the weekly watch list video sponsored by Market Smith. As always, we're going to run through my focus list for this upcoming trading week, and there's a lot of stocks to cover here, kind of around 14 main ones, and then there's also kind of my wider focus list or weekly focus list, and that'll be linked down below in the description. So there's a few here that aren't quite ready yet or are a little bit short-term extended, but I think are worth watching. For instance, AEHR, FSLR, I think those are potential true market leaders, but they're just not quite viable based on how I view things at these levels. So they'll have to kind of basically consolidate and form another setup. But these are the ones that are a little bit more actionable for this upcoming trading week. And just to show you kind of the industry groups I'm looking at, you've got a little bit of auto parts here, but oil and gas, medical, biotech, semiconductors, and also solar on here. So that's kind of the universe that I'm kind of watching here. So let me know your thoughts as we go through these on these stocks, and let me know any that you're watching as well. And if you do enjoy my analysis at any time, please go ahead and take the time right now to leave me a like down below. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one, as well as tutorials and interviews with top traders. So with that said, let's move on over to the chart and quickly go over just the general market, just some situational awareness. We're still below a declining 200-day moving average on the NASDAQ and most of the indexes. On the Dow Jones, we're above it, but I don't really count that because it's only 30 stocks. And even going to the S&P 500, we're still below this key level, below a declining 200-day moving average. So by no means are we out of the woods yet, out of this bear market. The longer-term trend remains down, and really anything can happen. It's been extremely volatile recently. Last week, kind of nothing really happened. We, of course, had some options expiration, and next week is kind of a holiday week, so keep that in mind. Volume in general might be lower, so just in general, be ready for anything. But we're back above a rising 21 EMA. We're back above the 50 SMA. So in the short term and intermediate term, things are definitely shaping up a little bit more, but that doesn't mean we can't undercut these moving averages and revisit these lows. We'll just have to see what actually happens in the market. So with that, let's move on to the focus list and start with ORLY, and let me bring up that chart right here. Okay, so looking at the chart, you can see we're basically at 52-week highs. Let's go to a monthly chart here. Super strong action. This is a longer term leader. Going back to the daily chart, you can see that we had a nice gap up on earnings. We're above a rising 21 and 50 SMA, and basically forming a tight consolidation. You can basically buy it through this type of pivot. We had an inside day and up setup on Friday, but we're basically looking for continuation. And going over to a 60-minute chart, you can see that we've got a pivot at these levels, as well as just above 840. So that's kind of what I'm watching for with this stock, and it's definitely one to watch because of that earnings gap and the fact that it's right at 52-week highs. And you've got a few other names in the group that are acting well. AZO is one off the top of my head. So you've got kind of that group confirmation. You can see this overall group is ranked 3 out of 197. Moving on, we've got WFRD, and going over to a weekly, let's take a look here. You can see it's right near all-time highs. Looks pretty good. Going back to a daily chart, short-term consolidation, a little bit of tightening up here. So I'm basically watching for a push through these pivots on volume. And going to a 60-minute chart, you can see it's compressed here. You've got a pivot right here, as well as that high from that last 60-minute bar, and then also this pivot right here, looking for a push through on volume, managing risk either at the low of this range around here or even the low of the day on Friday. So that is WFRD. Moving on to ACDC, you can see there's a recent IPO trending above the moving averages, right near all-time highs. This definitely was a day of potential profit taking, so keep that in mind. We're right at kind of this volatile area where we're right above that pivot, so anything can happen. But we had an inside day on Friday, nice close as well. And going over to a 60-minute chart, you've got this pivot right here, and basically a short-term flag that we could push through on volume. So that is ACDC. Moving on to PRCT. First, look at the daily. You've got a nice flag here above the moving averages. Looking at a weekly chart, you can see once again we're at that kind of key level. We're right near those IPO highs, that IPO highs. I know that's kind of confusing. The highs from that IPO run. So it's definitely a key level on a higher time frame. And now we're shaping up with a nice tight week, and you can see that basically translates over to a flag on a daily time frame. So basically looking for a push through here on volume, and the higher the volume, the better. Great sales growth from this name as well. Moving on, we've got Dexcom, another earnings gapper that's consolidating. It's kind of leaking down a little bit because you can see it's kind of moving down. It's near the lows of this base or the low of this day here. I'd love to see this kind of be a little bit higher within this range. But nevertheless, if it does break through here, it could be potentially actionable. And most likely it would set up another pivot before it finally pushes through that 123.36 area. So nevertheless, if you're really involved in this name, it's got cool fundamentals, it's got a cool story. Definitely an area to watch, and definitely want to see it hold these lows right here, as well as the 21 EMA. TMDX kind of in a similar spot here. Medical products, you can see, is right near all-time highs. Actually, let's double check that here. Yeah, right near all-time highs after pushing basically from all the way these lows. So it definitely was a very deep base, which is flawed, so keep that in mind. But we've moved up strongly. Volume is increasing overall, and good volume the past 2 weeks as well. Over on the daily chart, it's gapped up here on earnings. Looks like we had a 39% surprise, and now it's going sideways. So I'd like to see maybe one more day of consolidation, some tightening, or if it just decides to push through here on volume. We do have some profit taking around this area, so it's going to be tough to get through around this level. But if it does manage to push through that, that would definitely be a promising start to a trend. But it might need a little bit more time, a few more weeks to consolidate above that 21 EMA and above that 50 SMA. Next up, we've got AMGN, a mega cap here that has been super strong up here and now is forming a flag back into this kind of gap area. You could buy it through these highs, but ideally we get a little bit more of a consolidation, let that 21 EMA kind of catch up to price here, and basically have this consolidate above 280. Next up, we've got UTHR forming a nice flag here. You could buy it through these pivots right here. Let me bring up the 60-minute chart. You can see this is basically the pivot. And you can see that nice push on volume on the lower time frame. So that is UTHR. Moving on, we've got ALNY, which is a biotech, so keep that in mind. Another recent earnings gapper that's now just kind of forming out of base here. And you've got basically a clear pivot right at 220 going to the shorter time frame. You can see it pushed up on Friday, breaking through this flag. But we've got basically the pivot right below 220 here and a nice push late in the day Friday. So it could be one that moves early on Monday. Moving on, we've got PRTA, which is a similar type of setup. We had that earnings gapper, and now it's consolidating, and it's right above that 21 EMA, so it could be actionable if it breaks the short-term flag. But also, I'd love to see it kind of move up, consolidate, pull back one more time, and then form a nice pivot, and you buy it here, manage risk versus that swing low, or even this low right here, and that would kind of give the 50 SMA a chance to kind of catch up to price a little bit more. Keep in mind, these biotechs are very volatile, so you want to manage risk, both, of course, with the stop loss as well as your position sizing. ENPH, this is a solar name. Solar continued to kind of reassert itself. We had SHLS gap up on earnings. We had ARRY push up the right side of its base. This one is a little bit more developed, but we do see signs of profit taking around these levels on these bars right here. A lot of eyes are in this one, so I'd love to see it kind of consolidate, wear everybody out, kind of get everybody bored about this name, and then finally push through on volume. But nevertheless, I'm basically watching for a breakout through a pivot and have it stick on enormous volume. Great fundamentals with this name. GFS, semiconductor stocks, also kind of reasserted themselves last week, going over to a 60-minute chart. You've basically got a short-term pivot right at these levels, and we'll have to see what happens. This would have been a really nice buy spot on that Friday. ON within that same space also has a similar pivot right here, right below this gap, and going back to the daily chart, you can see it's a little bit further from those all-time highs, but a really nice reversal bar here off the 21 EMA. We've also got SANM in that same type of space. Nice gap up on earnings. We had a nice surprise here, 12%, and a nice reversal bar here on the 17th, and basically consolidation day. It's getting really tight in this area. So over on the 60-minute chart, basically it had a short-term break of this flag, and now it kind of is consolidating a little bit and basically is forming a range under this level. So basically watching for a breakthrough here on volume. You can manage risk very tightly against this low or against this low right here, which gives it a little bit more of a wiggle room. Docs, a recent earnings gapper. This is kind of off the lows here, so keep that in mind. This setup won't be for everybody, and most likely is for a short-term trade into that 200 SMA area. But nevertheless, it's consolidating nicely, going over to a 60-minute chart. You can see we had that gap down. This held, which I really like, and then was retested and bounced up So basically I'm watching for a short-term flag break or just a push upwards on volume. And basically we're seeing some nice spikes in volume here late last week. So that is docs. And I believe that is it for this focus list. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on these stocks and any others that you're watching and you think I should be as well. So thanks again for tuning in. Hope you guys all have a fantastic week and a great Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for each and every one of you, especially those who watch all the way until the end of the video. So thank you so much. Please, if you did enjoy, go ahead and leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.